The views and opinions expressed in these historical letters that may contain vernacular used in the World War II era, the post-war era, and the Cold War era do not reflect the views and opinions of any of the individuals involved with this project, including, but not limited to, the podcast's creators. Morning, Jamie.
Morning.
How are you doing this morning?
Lovely morning.
It is a lovely morning.
Got the coffee.
Well, now we're fully in fall. Always coffee. All the time.
I love fall. I love that fall. It's my favorite season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we're heading towards my favorite season, which is the winter. So, but still always off for the winter. Today, we have 3 letters, all from Sweetie, all from Ottumwa. And she's going to let us know really what's going on throughout the majority, I would say, of May of 1944. So, for those listening to the podcast, thank you to our loyal subscribers for listening. If you haven't yet subscribed, please like, share, and subscribe to the Love Sweetie podcast. Check out updates on www.lovesweetiepodcast.com. Please follow us on Instagram. There's some fun vintage photos that wind up on Instagram. Please leave comments on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I wanted to say all this early in the episode. I usually say it at the end, but we really do appreciate all of our subscribers, and we hope more following the podcast as the community of the Love Sweetie listeners continues to grow. And with that, we'll kick off the first letter, which is from May 12th of 1944. May 12th, 1944. From Officer in Charge of Everything Nobody Else Wants. To our sister. Subject, this and that. We start with something interesting, which our audio listeners aren't going to see on the screen here, which is there's some sort of fill in the blanks going on here that the paper seems to be a little different. That there's a from, to, and subject, which is usually a memo. We think about emails, right? From, to, and then we have our subject line. But this is, of course, the written message. So she's writing officer in charge of everything that nobody else wants. And we have the letter here just so people can see this, as it's on some historic paper. So this is, and I'll bring it up to the camera here, the official letterhead, the U.S. Naval Reserve Aviation Base, Ottumwa, Iowa, with the contract number memorandum. So she's filling in the memo sheet, and she's using this for her handwritten letter to Jean. And we also get to get a very, very good view of Sweetie's elegant handwriting and her cursive. But yeah, so if people were wondering, officer in charge is printed on the memo paper, and she's filling in after it of everything nobody else wants.
So she's just a little humor injected in. I like it.
From Sweetie. First thing.
Your little letter got quite a snicker from the male element. However, I don't believe you're quite the orphan. You seem to think you are, since you've probably had a letter from me by this time. We enjoyed Bob's letter. I wrote to him twice this week, but we don't do much, and there's not such a lot here to write him about. I changed my bond allotment so that we get a $50 bond a month instead of a $25 one. It sure cuts down on my paycheck, but since we get along okay, I guess it's not too bad. Believe it or not, we run shortest on those days when you come to see us. Jean Melrose left today to go to Chicago for 2 days. That means I have to be messenger as well as do my own work. Oh, look what I found here. It is the 7th, too. No wonder I haven't heard from you. This has been in my desk drawer. I cleaned it out this AM. I ran myself ragged on those 2 days he was gone. I was never so glad to see him as I was Monday morning. We've done nothing but go to one movie. That was The Uninvited. And if you want to see a good spook movie, see it. Lou went to sleep as usual, but I thought it was good. We were out late because we went to see the last show. Last night, I fixed a real good big dinner. Since warm weather has come, Lou has lost his appetite. He's quite happy to eat a sandwich and drink milk, but he's losing weight. Last night, I decided I'd do myself up proud, so I fried ham. Browned it real nice, shoestring some potatoes. They didn't get any too brown, but they didn't soak, and were nice and crisp. I fixed some cauliflower creamed. I'd never fixed any before. Had lettuce salad with my kind of Russian dressing, made iced tea, and bought and fixed a box of royal chocolate pudding for dessert.
Yeah. So
I'm hungry.
I'm hungry. Yeah, from
That
listening
sounds
to
really
the
good.
creamed cauliflower. I'm not
Yeah,
familiar.
well, yeah, you can make cauliflower. You can make it like mashed potatoes.
Yeah, so I guess that's basically what she's doing with it, even though she also is having potatoes with it. So it must have been popular at the time. Cauliflower is extremely popular as a option, I think, for gluten-free. Like I've seen all
Oh,
those
yeah.
like cauliflower crusts and things. Cauliflower's come way back in.
Oh, yeah. Like riced cauliflower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For an alternative to a
Mm-hmm.
carb-heavy mashed potatoes, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know. I like my mashed potatoes. But this sounds very lovely, and she's taking care of her husband.
She is, yep.
Although I would say I'm always just happy to eat a sandwich too.
Yeah,
Yeah. But she's taking care of her husband and cooking for him, and that's lovely.
yeah.
Everything was delicious, and I was as pleased with me as Lou was. His 48 comes on this Friday and Saturday. I'm afraid to take any time off, so we're doing the cleaning in shifts. I'm going tonight to see if the lady will do my curtains. Then Lou's going to clean the wallpaper in the bedroom and kitchen. He's going to help with windows and woodwork, and then on Sunday, I'll do the tag ends.
I just wanted to comment here because this does come up a lot more in the 40s and 50s than I think it does today. The idea of cleaning the wallpaper. I don't think that's as common these days. Wallpaper is not used as frequently in homes
Yeah.
as it was.
No, it's not.
But yeah, there was a lot of special cleaning that was going on with wallpaper at the time period. And she makes reference of this in future letters. So there had to be some specific way that they were really handling that back then. And the wallpaper, the quality of it was probably different. It was probably better. Everything was made to last back then.
Oh, I'm sure it was much better. And he was a smoker.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I'm sure the wallpaper was covered with,
It could be the
cigarette
smoke. Yeah, from all
Yeah.
the smoking of the time.
Sunday, I spent the day putting away wool clothes in some demoth stuff. Seems like I've written all this to you before this. We haven't heard from Lou's mother, or mine, since we sent the flowers. I did tell you about the flowers, didn't I? I'm all fouled up, as Lou would say, so I think I'll wait till I hear from you, so I'll know what I have and have not written. Love, Lou and Sweetie.
That letter seems to me more of like kind of like an afterthought, she
Yeah.
wasn't really, it was kind of more like, I need to keep up with you because she found that in her desk.
You found it in her desk, yeah. She's being a little fun, describing a couple things. We do know that Mother's Day has happened, so they've sent something out. Makes sense. What, second Sunday in May? I think is usually Mother's Day, so this letter's coming out on the 12th. Yeah, so around the Mother's Day time.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll head into the next letter, May 16th.
May 16th, 1944. From Officer in Charge. Tee. To Jean. Subject. I guess I should write to you, for your 2 letters came before you got one of mine. There's little to tell, though. We wired Mrs. Graham a potted plant. Rather, it was an assortment of flowers that are to bloom all summer. We thought they could be transplanted to the yard. The place is quite pretty in summer, as I understand, and we thought it would be nice to get the plants that she would be able to enjoy all summer long. We mailed Mom a cut flower bouquet, not just one kind, but an assortment. I hope it was nice. It would have been too hard to mail her a potted plant, as I'd have liked to have done. We've not heard from either of them yet to know if they got there all right, or pretty badly mangled.
This is curious to me that the harder one to get, like it's easier to send a potted plant to Pennsylvania, but not to Lacona, like an hour and a half away.
Perhaps maybe there was more vendors around the Philadelphia area than in Lacona. Yeah, that it might have been the potted plant might have had to come from
nearby.
Like,
yeah, in Philadelphia, but not nearby in Lacona. Yeah, but they're trying to send the flowers, and at least it wraps up the ending of the last letter, where I guess she realized she hadn't written about the flowers yet.
I guess. Well, she said she got 2 letters from Jean, so Jean was probably like, "No, you didn't tell me anything about the flowers."
Yeah. Please tell me about the flowers, and then we can pick up the pace of it.
Maybe you're the one that needs to get some sleep.
Yeah, definitely.
Lou has heard through the well-known grapevine that there is a draft of third-class mechs going out in 2 weeks. That would be approximately May 30th. I have a feeling that this is the draft as far as we're concerned. He's been here just about as long as he can be, and I'm feeling that he can escape no longer.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. Let's rewind the clock a little bit for Lou. Lou joins, I think, in 1942, and he goes out to Ottumwa. He's certainly there by early 1943. And when she's talking about the draft of third-class mechs, so it had been discussed that Lou's a mechanic, and they're going through the ranks, and they're saying, okay, who hasn't gone yet? He's been in Ottumwa for a while. And Mrs. Corey, Eleanor, when she wrote the letter right after the wedding, she said some things about what would happen if Lou had to go abroad. Basically, if Lou moved, she's going to go with him. You know, so we're starting to get that sense that maybe a change could be coming soon from Ottumwa. He has been here, as Sweetie says in this letter, he's been here just about as long as he can be. So he's probably, like, if you think about like seniority for just time at one location, he's probably one of the rare cases that has been there consistently and for a long, long time. And it's going to become apparent when you have like whole new classes of men coming in that are going abroad, that this one individual has been here pretty nonstop in Ottumwa. So, yeah.
I spent Sunday sorting clothes to go to the cleaner and packing all the things that would be packed without being cleaned. I used a moth spray and then packed them in crystals too, so I know that I've done all I can to keep moths out of them. I'm waiting now to hear from Mom whether she'll keep them in her box room for me. I'm getting all the things like that taken care that I can, so that if he should get his orders to leave immediately, I won't have so much to do before I can go too. I'm going to go with him when he leaves here, if he has enough notice to help me get things taken care of.
This just, like, the whole feeling is like a heaviness.
Yeah.
Like there's this heavy cloud that's hanging over, but she's dealing with it by preparing as much as she can.
Yeah. There's been times where in the past he's like, oh, he might get deployed. This is the first time we're seeing actual action being taken. She's getting things packed up, getting things ready to go. And it's signaling, I think in the letters especially, that something's coming on the horizon here. And the other thing is she's going to send things over to her mother because you're unsure what situation you could wind up in. Is there going to be space to store things? There were all these gifts from the wedding and things like that. What are the essentials? So she's going through.
He also heard that the draft that will leave in 2 weeks is headed for Philadelphia. I'd a lot rather he did get sent there than to Seattle or someplace like that. Lou had duty Sunday night, and so I worked late. Last night it rained real hard, and we sat out on the porch in the cool and watched it rain until time to go into bed. One of my friends out here, I have two, has gone to the hospital for an appendicitis operation this morning. I hope she gets along all right. We've not had much mail, not even from Lou's mother. I've got to go now. I'll try to write more later.
Yeah.
That letter just definitely had this feeling to it. There's this impending sense of like change is coming up, and they have no control over what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
So she's just trying to control what she can and get things ready. And her plan is to follow him wherever he goes.
Yeah. And there's also, and this is more so for wars that are prior to the 20th century, but there's always been this sense in military history, at least prior to the 20th century, that when you get into May is when the campaigns really start moving. There was definitely this in the Civil War. So it becomes so much historic. There's still, of course, actions going on. When you get to 20th century, you can have nighttime warfare and you can have all these things. But historically speaking, there's this idea of like winter quarters, right? And you think about like Valley Forge, the encampment of Washington's army. Civil War, very few big scale battles in the winter, except for the total disaster of Fredericksburg in 1862 in December with General Burnside. If you know your Civil War history, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't know your Civil War history, it's just not good. It's not good. It's not good for Burnside. It's not good for Burnside representing the state of Rhode Island. Sorry if you're listening from Rhode Island. You should probably look up what happened and why there's questions about your General Burnside. But yeah, winter, not usually, but when the weather turns good, that's usually a signal that campaigns are really going to be going into action. And while that's going to be less so, of course, in the 20th century because of technology, there's this just general historic sense of if there's going to be some sort of a push or an offensive, it's going to happen as you start to head into the late spring and into the summer. So there's all these concerns. And because that's kind of the legacy of things, everybody's getting the sense, Mr. Corey went to Washington. We don't know if he's back yet. Right? He left the base February 15th. He was no longer at Ottumwa. Things are definitely changing at this point. Mm-hmm. All right. And then we're going to head into our third letter of the episode here. And this is the letter from May 23rd.
May 23rd, 1944. Dear Jean, since you're in Des Moines, you've heard all the flood news. With unflyable weather, they've tied down all the planes and sent about 300 boys in to fight the flood, aid in evacuations, and keep bridges, etc., cleared of rubble, floating buildings, etc. Of course, my husband has gone to give aid and comfort to the poor unfortunates. May 27th, 1944. Last night was Lou's duty night, and I firmly resolved to do the darning, but the quietness of the house, coupled with a morbid feeling aggravated with the curse, made me shed a few tears and go to bed. This morning I am quite up to par and almost didn't mind getting up and coming to work. Oh, these women. Lou was gone from Friday until Tuesday night working downtown, carrying goods up from the store basements, moving houses of furniture, and patrolling the levees along the river. He did get home Tuesday night, though, pretty tired, but not feeling badly. They had quite a scare and excitement to match it, but the bad part is over now. All that is left is the disgust of the people, who will have to put up with water in basements, etc. Monday night. Wait a minute, I've got my days mixed up. Lou was home Monday night. I guess he was gone from Tuesday until Wednesday night.
Okay, so we need to pause here and talk about what's going on in late May in Iowa. And Iowa is precariously positioned geographically between two major rivers. We've got the Missouri River on its western border and the Mississippi on its eastern border. Carves the borders of the west and the east of the state. There's been a lot of storming. And we knew this because we were talking about the snow. They had snow in May. The weatherman has been all over the place. Now, Chester thought it was going to rain for 7 weeks on every Sunday. I don't know if that actually happened. That was in the previous episode. If you missed that episode, that's an interesting letter from Chester. But it certainly has been raining a lot. He was certainly right about there would be a lot of rain coming. And this becomes a historic year for flooding. And what happens about May 19th in the papers, if we go back to the papers of the time from Iowa, from Des Moines, we start seeing reports that the water's rising, which is always terrifying because you can't escape a flood. If the rivers overflow their banks, if the levees break, if we think about in recent history, the biggest flooding in my lifetime, at least watching the media coverage of, was Katrina.
Oh, I was just going to say, New Orleans.
New Orleans. Have
you been to New Orleans?
I haven't. That's on my list. On my list.
I went to New Orleans to visit friends, and we also did have a national convention in New Orleans in 2018.
Yeah, that's right. That was down there.
I visited some friends, and behind their house there was a giant wall, and that's where the water was.
Ooh,
it was above their house.
Yeah.
So New Orleans is like below sea level anyway. So yeah, like that was just a horrific disaster.
Yeah. But I remember when I was hearing the news about Katrina, and after the fact we heard stories about Katrina, one of the interesting things I heard about during Katrina that I didn't hear about in other subsequent flooding was the levees breaking. And what's going to happen in this flooding, if I was reading the articles correctly and the notes that are available about this flood in May of 44 that hit Iowa, it's not just the rivers, it's also the levees are overwhelmed. So this is beyond the point, like all the controls that are in place to try to control the flooding, even if, the rivers are getting high, are going to break down. And what's going to make this really, really tough is it's just been non-stop water, and snow melting, and you're surrounded, like your eastern border is the Mississippi, So there seems to be a bit of like a lowland section of Iowa that can be hit really hard by floods. And that's what's clearly going to start happening to the point. And after we're done with this letter, I'll go into some of the articles so we can see some of the impact here, but it's very, very clear that in a newspaper that almost always is focused on what's going on abroad with World War II, those articles start to leave the front page as the flooding takes over. So you know it's really, really bad. So that's what they're talking about here.
Hi, everyone. This is Allison. We're taking a break here from the podcast for a moment, just to explain a couple of things. We are going to resume with Sweetie's letter from May 1944 here momentarily, but I wanted to explain that due to a scheduling matter, Jamie and I actually recorded this episode a couple of weeks ago prior to Hurricane Helene impacting the Southeast the way that it has. So our commentary that you just heard is based on our experience of hearing the news coverage of Hurricane Katrina. Obviously, Hurricane Katrina, at least right now, is still the worst storm in our lifetimes, at least of the last 50 years or so from the news reports. But the impact of Hurricane Helene is massive. So what I have on the screen here, especially for our audio listeners that are not seeing the slides, is the website and the visualization of the page that's currently appearing for the American Red Cross. If you can donate to the American Red Cross or whichever other organization is helping with relief efforts in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, I strongly encourage that you do so. Our hearts, our prayers, our thoughts are going to the families and friends of the victims of this horrible, horrible tragedy. My mind thinks back, and I'm tearing up here, which of course you can't see, but my thoughts think back to what my parents went through, especially what my mother went through. And what her parents went through, and the communities of Pennsylvania in June of 1973 with Hurricane Agnes. There are a lot of people that have commented, that it's so unusual that things happen in the mountains in Appalachia. I think people need, especially in Pennsylvania, if you're listening from Pennsylvania, to look back through the history books of what happened in the Appalachian area of Pennsylvania in June of 1973 with Agnes, where parts of the governor's mansion were underwater after the Susquehanna flooded its banks. That was happening in the middle of Watergate. And as I look at these scenes from Hurricane Helene in the mountains, in Appalachia, in North Carolina, in Tennessee, and other areas, I just keep thinking this is what it must have been like before I was born. For my grandparents in the mountains, they were in a town called Likens. They're gone now, both of these grandparents. But the house was flooded completely, basically up to the ceiling of the first floor. They luckily had a 3-story house, so they were able, as the floodwaters came up, because they were next to a creek, to move the furniture into the second and third floor. But the side of the house, the first floor, was ruined. So just seeing these images, this video coming out from North Carolina, makes me think of what my family went through. And everybody needs to help as much as they can. At that time, people came out to help those communities as well. And Americans have this amazing ability to help complete strangers. So if everybody, in whatever little way they can help these communities, please do. And the easiest way, of course, I think, is to donate to an organization dedicated all the way back to Clara Barton, right? With that, which is the Red Cross. So again, thoughts and prayers to the people in these states. And we wish you the best for all of the recovery, because it's going to take a long, long time for these areas to recover from the impact of the storm. All right. We're going to get back to Sweetie's letter, which is also going to be covering a very significant flood that happened in Ottumwa. Thank you.
We've met a young couple, married about 6 weeks longer than we've been. She doesn't work, and as a result, they're broke.
and by the time payday rolls around and they wonder where the next meal is coming from. So we invited them out to dinner on Monday night. Me and my cooking, we took quite a ribbing, but I noticed they ate pretty well. She's a pretty good cook herself, and so I drafted her into part of the work. She mashed the potatoes, and she did a beautiful job on them, too. They were just as smooth and as light as they could be, something you read about in a recipe book. We had pork chops, mashed potatoes and gravy, buttered asparagus, lettuce and tomato salad, bread and butter, coffee, and later on in the evening we had ice cream and strawberries. We sat around and talked until about 10 when they left. Yes, she did help do the dishes. It wasn't anything extra, but it was pretty nice, and a lot more fun than I'd imagined. She's a giddy little blonde who is pregnant but refuses to acknowledge it and go to a doctor. Besides that, she's as scared as I am that her husband will be sent out, and the prospects of having a baby while he's gone have thoroughly frightened her. Both her mother and father are dead, and the only alternative she'd have would be to go and live with his father and stepmother. Do you blame her for not wanting a baby? And yet she does want him. Kinda so, and kinda not so.
It's a very tough situation to be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got wartime in the background. Sweetie's worrying about the same thing. Because this could happen.
She's seeing that very scenario played out in front of her.
Right. And she at least has resources in Iowa. Her parents are still there. I feel bad for this. We have some great sympathy, I think, for this individual that, half of the parental relationships of that relationship are gone. And who knows about the character, who these people are, the father and the stepmother, and that dynamic of the in-laws, and then the son being away if he's sent away to war. But, it calls back again, that letter from Eleanor right at the wedding. What if somebody gets deployed? What if somebody gets pregnant while they're deployed? And how are they going to deal with that? So this is making it very real in Sweetie's mind that this could totally happen.
Our fan mail has fallen off a great deal again, much to our sorrow. Part of it is due to the fact that Lou's Uncle Lane died Saturday night, and his mother has been very busy with arrangements and everything. She hadn't written for quite some time, and Lou had been worried about his dad, so we called them last Friday night and talked to them for a while, and then they called us the next night, which was Saturday, to tell us that Uncle Lane had died. Of course, it was useless to try to get leave to go for the funeral, and it would have been a hurried and half-hearted trip besides, so we did not spend much time thinking about it. We did ask that they send flowers in our name, though, and so we weren't entirely left out.
Yeah. So, this is why Sydney hasn't been writing. Because they were concerned in the other letters. We haven't heard, and finally they just break down. We have to call. Let's find out what's going on. Let's call long distance and see what's happening. And then the next night they get the call back. And we'd heard Uncle Lane was sick. Yeah.
We've not heard from them since, but maybe we will hear tonight. That darn Jean, well, I admit I haven't written any too well. But don't you owe me? We stayed home Wednesday night for fear Lewis be dragged off the street and put on flood detail. Thursday night we went up to Corey's and around until time to go home. Friday night was duty, and tonight I'm going to stay out and go to a movie with his... It is a rerun of the oldie, Penny Serenade, with Irene Dunn and Cary Grant. I like to stay out when Lou can go home with me, but I hate to go home alone. His name has come up for a draft, but he was placed later he was taken off the list. However, since his name has come up once, it is very likely that he'll be at the top of the list for the next draft or so. I cannot imagine living without him now, and my fears, however ill-based they may be, seem to grow each day, and I cannot quite explain how I feel. Sometimes, especially when I'm alone, like on his last duty night, I get to thinking about it, and going to bed alone often makes me dream about it. His going away, I can't spare a minute away from him, and as each day goes by, I can mentally chalk it off as being just one day sooner to the time when he will leave. He's always said that I knew it was coming. We talk of it often and plan what I'll do if and when he leaves and everything like that, but we must be thankful for the 6 months we've already had together. I cannot leave to come alone to visit the family. I always think, well, I can put that off until the time he's gone, and my weekends become long, uninteresting days. I didn't know I could love him so much that just loving him would be so much fun. I'm being the best I know how to be, so we can have just that much more to remember. Listen to me. You'd think he was dead. I haven't written to Bob for a few days, and I should, but letter writing takes time and thought, and somehow I have neither. Don't be sore at me for not having written and punish us both by not writing. Love, Sweetie, and Lou.
Mm-hmm.
Such an intense. It's just you can feel it. I can feel it. This impending sense.
Mm-hmm.
This I want to say doom,
Right.
but yeah, like listen, she realizes too
something's coming.
Yeah, that she's like, oh, I have to get out of this, but it's hard, and I can totally. This is where a lot of women were at this time.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, like I can feel her pain in this, and of course she's talking to Jean, whom she can like, let all these fears out to. She doesn't want to bog down Lou.
Yeah, this is very intense, and it's just like one line after another line after another line in this very dense paragraph, and I think we have to take a moment to really appreciate just how deeply she feels about what's going on here. We have to be thankful for the 6 months we've already had together. There were so many couples that didn't have 6 months together, especially in wartime. She's had 6 months. And it's actually really beyond that, right? Because they were married in December, but they were palling around with Jean and running around Ottumwa since about August of 1943. So it's almost a full year. But then, of course, as a married couple, it's 6 months. Then she makes this note, I could come visit the family. So she hasn't really been home to Lacona that much, at least not without him, because her thinking is that if he goes off, like, what if something, this could be the only time. So I can do that later. I can do everything else later. And then the phrase, my weekends become long, uninteresting days. Everything's just going to be sort of in stasis when he's gone. The line, I didn't know I could love him so much that just loving him would be so much fun, is just cute. Yeah, that little line. And then I'm being the best I know how to be, so we can have just that much more to remember. And he's going to hang on to that, of course, if he gets deployed. So from everything, from the good times and the bad, and it's mostly been good times, even outside all of this rain and other things. And she's looking at the comparison with the other couple. I can't help but feel that, he's going, something's going to happen here. She's worried. And she's looking at their life compared to hers and Lou's. And she's been busy, but, with all these letters saying, I'm starting to pack things up. We've just been too lucky. We've been too lucky. There's going to be a change. It doesn't seem like we're going to be able to stay in Ottumwa. As much as all of us, and I know, Jamie, that we've been feeling, we really have come to love Ottumwa through these letters, through Sweetie's experience of it, talking with Stephen, the people of Ottumwa. I can't wait to visit Ottumwa again, and I'd love to find some of these spots, at least where they were. I know that there is the canteen in the alley. Very, very good. Have a good milkshake there and a hamburger sandwich. So
I want to go. We have to go.
We have to go. Yeah. She's had a great time in Ottumwa. This is where she met Lou. This is where, she got married. This is where she entered the workforce. This is where she gained her business course. She builds this amazing relationship with the Corey family. A lot of the change from being a teenager to being a married woman has occurred specifically here, and it's been very fundamental, and she's going to carry that with her, through her life. So hearts to Ottumwa. We've enjoyed the time we've spent in Ottumwa, but we're getting the same sense that Sweetie has in this letter, which is it's not going to be for much longer. I'm just going to leave it at that for this letter because we're not there yet, but Ottumwa's kind of winding down as far as the histories go with regards to Sweetie and with regards to Lou. So I am now, though, going to share screen because I think we need to get some visuals about this flooding that they're talking about. And there's various resources that can be read here. I really do think that there needs to be a good historical study of this that's done. Floods are so important to study because it always leads to it being very important to figure out response times in flooding. That's how a lot can improve in the future, is if we study how floods are. This happened in Pennsylvania. This happened a lot with the hurricanes in the 60s and the 70s, there was some historic flooding on the East Coast. And as a response, the governments changed how they were dealing with, flood controls and things like that. I'm sure when Katrina hit, after everything happened, the levees, the local government, the state government, and federal government really took a strong look at the systems to prevent recurrence. And what I'm going to guess is, due to the scale of this flooding, there was probably a huge government effort to look at what could be done to prevent future damage and recurrence. And there are some studies about this. So for anybody that would like to look into these floods in particular, and I found this online, I thought this was really interesting. I'm not going to go into details because this is highly technical. But on the iowa.gov's website, and this is a publication, there's an entire geological survey that was done on the magnitude and frequency of floods in Iowa, and it includes floods in the 40s. So this is identifying by specific rivers, so it's tough to just call out, the May flooding here. But if anyone's interested in looking into this further, I strongly suggest going through the geological survey that's done. And they're doing this, of course, this is done by a hydraulic engineer because they're looking at what can be done. Yeah, it was published in July of 1966. And it has all of these various subjects, the topography, the climate, the streams in Iowa, the frequencies. It's very, very scientific. But through here, we can get sort of a lot of an idea of like what's basically in, I guess, like a risk area for flooding. So if anybody wants to read the old publication from 1966, the geological surveys are great. That is online. And again, that is on an iowa.gov site. So I'm going to look for the exact link there to share that with people who would like to look into the very technical science of what occurs in Iowa with flooding. I'm going to go into now. This is a photo. Now, both these photos, really May 19th is when the newspapers start really reporting what's going on, at least the Des Moines Tribune. So let me open up the screen here on this first picture. And this is the front page. But this is specifically in Ottumwa.
Oh, goodness.
Which is right on the front page of the Des Moines Tribune. The front page image for our audio listeners is a big, big photo of the sailors helping with the flooding in Ottumwa.
It says, and I'm trying to read like the
headline
caption here.
Yeah.
And it says, landlocked sailors of the Ottumwa Naval Air Station.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tuesday, assisting in evacuating Ottumwan. Ottumwan?
Landlocked sailors of the Ottumwa Naval Air Station took to the sea in quotation marks. They haven't had an ocean this whole time. Tuesday to assist in evacuating Ottumwans battling the flood. Here are some of the gobs launching lifeboats in the middle of an Ottumwa street. More than 600 sailors have been aiding other volunteer workers. So we hear the reference about the flood duty here. And this is the Des Moines Tribune, Des Moines, Iowa, Wednesday, May 24th, 1944. So this is right on the first page here. And it's just taken over from war coverage. And we have this kind of amazing image of all of these sailors standing off where they're still like ankle deep in water here, but they're launching lifeboats into the middle of the streets. So getting their, quote, sea experience in the middle of downtown Ottumwa. Not the way anybody really wanted them to get this experience, of course.
No. But I'm really glad that that base was there to have all these young men. I mean, because, like you said, like we've been speaking before, a lot of resources were being diverted to the war effort.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have like something like this happen, your resources are stretched. So thankfully,
thankfully they had a base. How many areas didn't have the base in close proximity to go send support out? And this was affecting across various areas. Now, we had the map of Ottumwa up in a previous episode. And what we know about Ottumwa, for anybody that missed that previous episode, I think it was episode 21 we went through. And if you go onto the lovesweetiepodcast.com website, we can go to the map. Actually, we can just go to the website. We can show everybody the map again. It's important to note where the river is if it's going to flood like this in Ottumwa. So I'm going to go to the lovesweetiepodcast.com website and we will bring up the map here. That is there. If you're following along on your computer. All right. So if you go to Sweetie's scrapbook and you go to the photos, you want to scroll all the way down to the miscellaneous photos of artifacts. And this is where the brochure is stored for Ottumwa. If you didn't see the brochure before, definitely check this out.
Definitely.
Yeah. Especially if you just appreciate the graphic design of the first page from the Ottumwa Chamber of Commerce in 1944. But the map of Ottumwa, Iowa is also right here. And when we bring this up on screen, I don't need to zoom in too much for everybody to tell that there's a river running through the city. So if we look at the city of Ottumwa, we have a winding river. Really, Ottumwa's divided. And that's the Des Moines River that's going through the city. We've got northern portion of Ottumwa, and we've got the southern portion of Ottumwa. This is what's flooding the city. So it's right in the downtown. And so I'm not sure where the picture was taken, but I have to imagine it's somewhere in this immediate vicinity of the river. All right. And then I do have another page here from, I believe, it's the same. This is page 9 of that same paper. So we get to see a little more of Ottumwa during the flood here. And here we go. All right. We've got a couple images to look at. Everybody's up to their knees, basically, in water.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Yep. This is a home being evacuated. This was on page 9 of that May 24th, 1944 issue of the Des Moines Tribune. So there's one image here. It says, Mrs. Delmer Lobdell left and Mrs. Orville Sylvester assist Charlie Ward in evacuating his home in the west lowlands of Ottumwa, Iowa. So we get the idea that there's some sort of like low topographical ground there. Chickens.
They're carrying chickens.
They're carrying the chickens. Chickens are carried to safety with other possessions. Additional refuge places are being set up as more residents are being driven from their homes. They're up to their knees. You cannot stay in this area, obviously. And then we get this other section here about the mail. Now, Sweetie's going to think this is the most important part here with the letters. As mailman Joe Knox of Ottumwa neared the end of his route Tuesday, he found it flooded, but the mail went through. He handed the remainder for delivery to Laverne Albertson, who was aiding in rescue work with his boat. And that's an official photo of the United States Navy. So the mail is still getting to the flooded areas. So
good job, Mr. Knox.
Good job. Yeah. The U.S. Postal Service is persevering. I'm going to look into more of like the totals of the water and the damage that came across Iowa when these storms hit. But this is clearly not the typical,
This was not something that they were accustomed to.
No.
This was an incredible event. Yes.
Yeah. So this is, I think, one of the things in Pennsylvania when we think about Hurricane Agnes in 73, which I've talked about a lot because it's really the big one in Pennsylvania. This is what they call acts of God. When you see this big flooding going through, and it seems that the May 1944, now maybe the Geological Survey is going to call out more. I saw that there was a really bad, I looked up like worst floods in Iowa. I think the worst ones, I think in 1896. There's a really tough one, but this has to be up there.
Oh, yeah.
It has to be pretty bad. So, and hopefully there's been a lot put in place to prevent recurrence of whatever happened in 44. But with that, this wraps up this episode 24 of the Love Sweetie podcast. There is change coming, as we've indicated, and the story is going to move a little bit as we start to depart and as we can tell that things are going to be happening with leaving Ottumwa. Episode 25 is a major episode. You don't want to miss episode 25. As to where Sweetie could be headed, I do have one little hint to show Jamie. And I'll describe it for the audio listeners because I'm just going to bring it up on the screen, and I think we just leave the episode with this one little hint. And it's something that I'm sure everybody has at home, which is just a little salt. See you next week.